legalizefreedom.com. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? From the nature of reality to the future of humanity. Listen without limits. Unchain your brain. Change your thinking. Change your life. legalizefreedom.com.
Greetings and welcome once again to legalizefreedom.com. I'm your host, Greg Moffitt. Beginning in August 2020, Freedom from Fear is a free-form discussion series taking the title as its starting point. In this episode, Phil Escott and I discuss the pandemic of fear ripping across the planet in the wake of the COVID-19 scare. Our modern obsession with safety and security, whether physical, emotional or both, is stifling and shutting down the natural free spirit all humans are born with. But life cannot ever be completely safe or secure, and was never meant to be. Those who seek to deny us the freedom to choose how we engage with the amazing and sometimes unpredictable world we find ourselves in, also deny themselves the magic and mystery of life itself. What do we wish our earthly existence to be? A technocratic prison planet dystopia, or a spontaneous order of intimately interconnected sentient beings? On a deeper level, we also explore the darker forces at work in this transitional time for our planet and ask, are current events all that they at first appear to be? If the real battle taking place is in fact a spiritual conflict, we may be on the cusp of almost unimaginable change on Earth. Hello and welcome, Phil. Thank you so much for joining us again today on legalizefreedom.com.
Well, Greg, it's great to be back, and thank you so much for asking me again. And it's funny, we go back quite a long way, and we've met in real life a few times, and it's been a crazy time since we last chatted. So I'm looking forward to this one.
It has. Now, some listeners may be familiar with chats we did previously on the channel here. We've talked about alternative healthcare, ways of looking after yourself that are more natural. We've talked about the carnivore lifestyle, carnivore diet, and pros, cons, and just controversy around that. And I think we also did a general chat about sort of spiritual awakenings. But anyway, if people have not heard us in conversation before, just tell people a little bit about yourself. And because you're a sort of man of many talents, many strings to your bow, this is why we've talked on so many different subjects.
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, I think probably what I'm best known for online is this carnivore thing. It's very strange to have been branded as the sort of English carnivore guy, but it was just something that I discovered after many, many years of researching into diet and in 2010 becoming very, very ill with rheumatoid arthritis and having to search ways of getting out of the fear, which is one of the main things you have to do, which is the topic of our conversation today, but also looking at all the things that I'd done over the years and all the ways that I was horrendously wrong and all the way that all the standard dogma was wrong. And so, I found a way to fix that. And I've got a little interesting thing about, almost 10 years to the day in October, just gone, where it came back again. And I had to figure it out again without any fear, which was an interesting journey too, this last couple of months. And, which was to do with the present situation, actually, directly and indirectly. So, most of my life I've spent as a sort of hippie traveler, living in buses and teepees early on in my 20s, and then on to spirituality and lots of meditation and massive amounts of hallucinogenics at one stage, and then into living up in Skelmersdale, where I still am, actually, but on the fringes of the Transcendental Meditation Movement Centre up here, where They have a lot of good stuff, in spirituality. There's a lot of wonderful stuff, and I think Greg and I have chatted about it on other one of our other chats. But and so I'm on the fringes of that now. I mean, I still have friends in it, but there's a lot of holes in that, really, in the dogma in that keeps you in fear as well. And now I think just the last 10 years have been really transformational of looking into a lot of the complete myths in everything across the board, whether it's health, whether it's how the politicians are duping us, whether it's mainstream media and what's going on at the moment, and the corporations and how they fool us into thinking that they have our best interests at heart, and how to get rid of the fear and how to become a kind of sovereign human being again, and how to reclaim that state of being responsible and for your own health and your own thoughts and your own family and your own path, really. And I think that's led me to the last 18 months, which has been some of the most fulfilling times of my life, which is working with my colleagues now, Ben Hunt, Graham Norbury, and Jeremy Ayres, and our publisher, John Gusty in the States, and with the Human Unleashed and a lot of the videos we've made together, many videos on so many subjects. And it seems to be one of those sort of meetings of the spirits. And I always thought I'd find my ideal band behind the drum kit, so I'm also a drummer, but it turns out no, that I found my ideal band in the sort of health and sort of blowing up a dogma sphere. So that's where I am right now, and working with them and working on a couple of books, one that's coming out soon, which is really based on helping people to reestablish their own sovereignty, to be able to not be influenced by these controllers, these owners in society that spread fear-mongering. And it's called the Red Pill Revolution. It'll be out in I think a couple of weeks now. We're just doing a couple of little tweaks on it. But I think that's really the basis of what I do when I look at it, is sort of finding ways to get rid of fear about what's happening. And that doesn't mean to say I'm always immune to it, but the amount of layers of fear that I've got rid of so far allows me to sort of hopefully nip these things in the bud when they come up and realize that, most of the things we're frightened of never actually happen. So that's where I am now, really.
Well, Frank Herbert had it, fear is the mind killer.
Yes.
It really is. It clouds your judgment. One thing I will mention, first of all, I didn't know about this Red Pill project, by the way. That sounds very interesting. But there are a couple actually who I've had on as guests, and I think you guys would be very much on the same page. They run a Facebook group called After the Red Pill. And it's Colin E. Davis and Melissa Murray, and I've had them on talking about these subjects, and they kind of embody for me the spirit of this Human Unleashed. And as soon as I saw that you were doing talks under this title, I thought, that's what a great name for it, And I said, that's something that, if I hadn't settled on legalized freedom years ago, maybe something like Human Unleashed would have been perfect, because it made me stand on top of the table and just shout at the top of my lungs, because everything is summed up perfectly in that. We are so incredibly powerful, whether it's physically, mentally, we're capable of so much, but we're constantly fed the idea that we're worthless and that we're nothing. And it has manifested itself most perniciously during the pandemic, in the idea that there's nothing you can do. The whole societies of people have been rendered unable to care for themselves, whether they're actually incapable of it or whether they've just been told they are. You run a business, you will not be able to do that anymore. You will suck on the government we will say when you stand up, when you sit down, when you come, when you go. And for me, the Human Unleashed was just, and I've enjoyed listening to so many of your conversations you've had with those guys. It makes me feel energized, just the phrase.
Oh, that's lovely, mate. I mean, we get so many messages. When we started this off, we thought, well, who's gonna listen to this? And I also put them up on my YouTube channel, which is just under my own name, Phil Escott, and they're all available on there. And I'm really surprised that they're still there, to be honest. I mean, I think we got like 22 of them up now, and I get subscribers taken away now. I mean, when I think about it, sort of a year ago before we started putting them up, I had 10,000 subscribers, and it hasn't shifted since then. And yet I get messages from loads of people that we're being unsubscribed, being shadow banned. And yet I'll go to the local supermarket and have people coming up and saying, wow, you know, those Human Unleashed chats, thank you so much for them. And they've really empowered us and helped us to get through this situation. I'm like, come on, we can't have 1,000 views on each of these if there's that many people that you run into locally, you know, and most of the people we hear from are in the States. So we're falling foul of that censorship that's going on, that widespread censorship at the moment, because we're obviously pushing some buttons. But it's lovely to hear that people like them. I mean, I have to say that my expertise is more in the health sphere and the sort of spiritual sphere and whatever, and I have to bow to my, particularly two of my colleagues, Graham Norbury and Jeremy Ayres, who have been really teaching me so much, because they've seen this whole situation coming up for decades, and they really understand what's happening in the whole financial system and the whole political system, and even above that with the you know, the stuff that we're not allowed to talk about really, with all the controllers really of the planet and what they're planning, which has been set out for centuries really. You know, if you look back at old stuff like the Club of Rome, and the stuff that I've learned in the last year has really put all the suspicions I've had all my life into perspective. And none of it's made me frightened, because I mean, even from the first second, I had one twinge back in February or whenever it was, when they said that they brought a load of people back from China and the buses were coming in and that they were named after the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse or something like that, or the company was. And they brought these infected people back from China into Liverpool, right near where I live. And then I looked at the videos and I thought, well, hang on, the bus drivers are just sitting there with no protective gear on and they're not bothered. And I thought, there's something wrong here. And from that moment, you know, I had one moment of little sort of butterflies of, oh my God, my kids are going to be hit with a deadly pandemic. And that lasted probably, you know, about 30 seconds or something. And then I looked at it and I thought, nah, there's something wrong here. And this is going to be a massive spreading of fear mongering. And since then, you know, learning from Jeremy and Graham really about what has been going on. Politically and above that, of how the politicians are controlled, has been incredibly eye-opening and really incredibly calming in a way, because I think that with all the scary stuff going on, with all the sort of possibilities, whether you're one of these people who wears muzzles in the supermarket, or even as I was shouting with my kids today as I took them to a dance class, people walking around in the street miles from Edinburgh on their own with muzzles on, of how we've all been fooled. When you look at that and the possibilities of the dangers of this society coming up and how it might be destroyed, or whether you're one of these people with muzzles frightened of some virus that has really caused no problems whatsoever, you know, in the scheme of things, whether either one of those, I think that really educating yourself and looking at what's happened in the past and leading up to this is one of the finest ways of getting rid of that fear. And I'm actually still very positive, because as long as you don't look at the mainstream media where it's all, you know, pushing all this nonsense and doom and gloom if it doesn't happen, there is probably no other outlet. I mean, I've listened to a lot of your videos, and you're spot on about it as well. I mean, how people can't see this for the fear-mongering it is, even if they're watching the mainstream media now, because none of it adds up really if you're watching it day to day. And so I think really educating yourself and turning off the TV and looking at all these other beautiful outlets, like, for example, Del Bigtree's Highwire, you know, where he's bringing on so many scientists and epidemiologists and virologists and doctors, and nobody's saying anything like the mainstream. So you get that in you have immediately no fear of any virus. And then you look at some of the people who are very, very much in touch with to take it into the sort of woo-woo sort of arena, really, but some of the people who have been very connected with all of this stuff as it leads up, whether they do it by intuition, whether they do it by astrology or whatever, but how this is a very beautiful time to be alive, and we just have to sit back and enjoy this show as it plays out, because hard as it might be in the short term, I'm with Jeremy that I'm very optimistic that this will come out in a beautiful conclusion at some point. Hopefully soon, hopefully over the winter or in the spring, but hopefully we could be sort of passing into some kind of age of enlightenment, I think.
Well, there's so many points really to comment on from what you just said. I think that the bottom line for me is that, what you mentioned about, educating yourself, becoming aware really is the antidote to fear. I think that stands as a general statement, but particularly applicable in this time. And of course, one of the memes that's been going around over the last few months is basically demonizing or trying to make appear foolish people who are doing their own research. Kind of like, you're not medically qualified. Why would you be doing any research? How could you possibly trust any learning that you could do on your own? But the point is not to pretend that you're a medical doctor or you're a virologist or any of these other scientific roles that take years of training. But that doesn't mean that you still have to be that helpless jellyfish that I referred to earlier, who doesn't do anything to inform themselves in any sort of independent way. And as far as the media goes, it's been spectacularly unhelpful. There hasn't been anything. Speaking to you with your alternative health and natural health, shall we say, ways of keeping yourself healthy in harmony with nature, with that hat on, has there been any talk about anything that you can do as far as your diet or exercise or any other regimen that will boost your immune system? There's been no talk about that whatsoever. It's all been absolute helplessness and looking to outside agencies. And this is one of the things I think people in life, it's one of the great life lessons for me, is like, stop looking to third parties for your reason, for your salvation, for whatever it happens to be. Stop looking outside. You have everything you need within yourself. And that, I apply that to the current situation in terms of our own bodies. Our bodies do give up sometimes. You're living testament to that. Our systems do sometimes fail, but they're the best defense we've got, as they are. The ingenious design.
Oh, totally. I mean, I made a video a while ago called, what was it? Eat fatty meat, get plenty of sun, protect the NHS, save lives. And it was a real sort of passionate one about the real pandemic here, which is the same people who are pushing all the vaccines and all the COVID mainstream stuff, the advice that they give for staying healthy is really absolute nonsense, completely controlled by the drug companies and the agriculture companies that want us to eat cereal in the morning and a sandwich for lunch and then, pasta and whatever in the evening. And this whole business, this whole sort of eat well plate and the standard guidelines that are put out, and the guidelines actually that the WHO put out about how to avoid COVID and avoid animal fats and eat vegetable oils. And, vegetable oils are probably the single most dangerous thing that's ever been given to humans. I mean, I think I'm always down on grains, and I think our health went down 10,000 years ago when we started farming grains. And so people who eat bread and rice and pasta all the time are probably in trouble. But the real problem is seed oils. It's absolute utter poison, and this is what they're pushing over animal fats. And it's just funny when you look at it. I mean, logic tells you that for millennia we were healthy. We didn't have any of these problems, and we were hunters. Look at a cave painting. I studied diet for decades, and 30 years I was caught in this nonsense, and I realized that 40 years of diet study now, I should have just looked at a cave painting, and there's one bloke and one spear and one mammoth, and we didn't have any of these problems that we have now. So obviously the WHO advice is absolute nonsense, and they're all pushing the plant-based dogma, the veganism, and the climate change thing, which is another load of fear mongering. Because I've been listening to actual, not even climate scientists who think it's all nonsense, but climate scientists who think it's real, but who actually think that all our solutions are nonsense. And that's exactly what you've touched on there, with the health thing. I mean, this COVID thing, whatever it is, we've gone into massive discussions on the Human Unleashed about what it is. I'm still not sure. I don't know if viruses are communicable. I don't know if they're pathogenic. I don't even know if they exist as such, and they're not exosomes produced from the cells, as Dr. Andrew Kaufman goes on about so eloquently, and Stefan Lanka. Those two are very, very worth listening to. I'm not sure whether they're not just stuff that's produced by the cells to help mop up at times of detox, natural times of detox, at autumn, spring, winter equinoxes. This is what generally happens. But whatever's happening, if you're not messed up, if you've not been following the standard diet, or even worse, the whole junk food diet, if you haven't been following what 99% of people on the planet follow, then you have no problem with this. Whatever it is, you're not going to have a problem with it. Whether it's a detox, that's going to be less severe in the autumn because you're going to have less crap to get rid of. If it is a communicable virus, the body's immune system is going to be much more powerful to get rid of it. So why are they just not cottoning on to this? I mean, Boris Johnson had it, apparently, whatever it is. He probably just had a regular seasonal cold, but assuming he had this horrendous, deadly virus that's going around, he got over it with the help of the NHS and all this sort of thing. And then he suddenly realizes that he's a fat bastard and he's got to do something about it. So then he's sort of posting, I'll eat less and go cycling. It just doesn't work. If it was going to work, then people would be off their diabetes meds in no time, like I see on my carnivore group. If you just eat meat and nothing else, diabetes is a joke illness. So all of this stuff that they're putting out is complete nonsense. And even if you don't change your diet, there are ways around it. The whole, when you see this video of Fauci back in 2005 talking about hydroxychloroquine and how effective it is against all respiratory ailments, and now he's saying it's nonsense and you can't have it because he's so financially involved in other things, of course, and in league with Bill Gates and all that kind of thing. But if you look at them, people can call you conspiracy theorists for this kind of thing, but if you look back at what he was saying in 2005, he's saying exactly what the doctors are saying now. We're saving lives. We're not putting them on ventilators. We're not. So all of this, if you can't get hold of hydroxychloroquine, you just take a load of zinc and you take quercetin, which has the same effect as hydroxychloroquine and gets the zinc into the cells. Maybe take some vitamin D if you like, or get under a sunbed even in the winter. Take some vitamin C if you like, or just go fully carnivore and really get your immune system up. Drop all the plants completely. Another controversial thing, since we're all told that 5 a day is the thing to do, and we need a load of fiber, which is absolute nonsense. If that was true, I've eaten carnivore and no plants for the last 6 years, so I'd be dead by now, but actually just increasing health. So, on all layers. And I think one of the important things, Greg, here is that what I'm proud of is my carnivore group, 100% Carnivore and Beyond on Facebook, that I started for just 5 friends about 3 years ago. Now there's, I think, 14,000 people or something. But when people post stuff about this, they're so open. I think when you've seen through one aspect of the complete and utter bullshit that's put out to us by the mainstream dogma, it's easier to see through the other things, right? I mean, if you've gone and tried eating nothing but meat and suddenly all your health issues have cleared up, all of the things that are supposed to be caused by meat and fat get cured by a carnivore diet. And once you've seen something like that, or it's the people who've woken up through realizing that 9/11 was nonsense, like Graham and Jeremy, maybe, my colleagues, whatever it is that's woken you up, you can see through the other things. You go, hang on a minute. The media is pumping out vegetarian food and fiber and fruit and veg and all of this kind of thing. And you think, hang on, that's nonsense. So what else is wrong? And then it's much easier to look, early on in this thing, I used to just turn the TV on and just actually cry with laughter. I thought, all of this is such nonsense. How can anybody not see this as anything but a comedy show? But now I see the damage they've done. And the horrific things that have happened. My partner, my girlfriend, she works as a nurse on the front line. And, she's hugging COVID patients and she won't wear a muzzle and she knows what's going on. These are not COVID patients. These people have just tested positive with this faulty PCR test, this ridiculous thing that they give them. So they're locked up in old folks' homes, not being able to see their family and friends. And it's criminal. It's genocide. And so she goes in, she hugs them. If they want to kiss her, that's fine, And she has no fear of it, no fear at all. And I know a lot of other people on the front line who've seen through it. And when you see this happening, okay, something's going on. There is something respiratory that's hitting people. But I don't think it's anything like we've been told. And if you ate right and if you did all the other right things, which doesn't involve giving up alcohol, jogging and eating a high-fiber diet, all these things that we've been told. Not that I'm condoning alcohol, in moderation, obviously. But, this is not the problem. The problem is the corporations. The problem is the owners of this planet who are earning the billions from this pandemic. And you follow the money and you see the incredible deceptions that are happening. If you saw what we all saw day to day, reversals of so-called incurable diseases and people just lifting out of depression as they fix their guts and use certain techniques to live more in the present, which we might get into later on. But, when you see this happening, it's just so beautiful. And this would all be over if they told all of this stuff with the same brainwashing frequency as they do on the mainstream media. This would be over, don't you think? This would be over in a day or two.
Today, you mentioning about your girlfriend hugging people, today was a big day for me, coincidentally, because I shook someone's hand. I shook the hand of a stranger today, and the last time I did that was on March 16th. It was Monday. And it was someone I was introduced to back then, and it was like I was going to be showing him the ropes on some task that he needed to do. So I was introduced to him. I can't remember his name now because I only met him. That he was out of a job the next day. This is John. Hello, John, this is Greg. Greg will show you what you need to do. Hi, John. Shake hands. And he said to me, "Oh, we're not supposed to do this, are we?" And that was March the 16th. And today I shook hands with a guy who's a street poet. He was just had a little microphone set up, and he was reading his poems on the street, and they were, of a sort of political nature. And I stood and talked to him for half an hour, and he said at the end of it, he said, I'll feel better. He said, because I didn't come out here feeling very good today about everything that's happening. And I said to him, well, I'm a people person. I like talking to people. And we shook hands and, we went our separate ways. And so, this is a momentous moment for me, really, for that human contact. But you reference it again with, the situation in care homes and the elderly and what have you. And, my mother's in a care home and I'm not convinced I'm going to see her alive again, to be quite frank with you.
That's tragic, mate. I mean, my mother, she was 94, 26, 2018, 23, 2018. She was coming up to 95. And the couple of years before that, we had reversed her breast cancer. I've got a video showing that with photographic evidence. At 92, 93, we reversed her breast cancer on a carnivore diet with a 5-pound bottle of Lugol's iodine as well, and kept her clear of all the drugs and chemo and whatever. And then she got, there's a video on my YouTube channel about it, but it gets shadow banned a lot. They don't like that. It's from a talk I did to doctors, and they were very open. And I love it when you see an oncologist turn around and go, how on earth did you do that? It's so cool. And they've never seen it before. It's so weird. I've seen loads of cases of it now. But, when she got the Australian flu, at the end of 2017, And she had bronchiectasis, so her alveoli were blown out in her lungs, and we got her off all the steroids and whatever, and her lungs were getting a bit better, but her lungs were still very compromised. So, the flu hit her hard. It was a nasty flu that autumn. And then it carried on. It sort of lingered on, and into the spring she got pneumonia, and she went into hospital. She recovered from it. She was fine. And then she went back in like April, and she died from it. And we were allowed to be there and be by her bedside. But that is no different to what's happening now. And if it was now, we wouldn't have been allowed in to see her. Well, to be honest, I'd have been walking into the hospital punching people, because it's just bollocks. I won't stand for it. I've not worn a muzzle. I never will. I've never worn one for a second. I'll go to jail before I wear one of those. I'll get shot before I take one of their vaccinations. But I won't stand for it. I will not stand for it. I won't have it. And she died, and she would have been obviously COVID positive if it had happened this year. So I'm sure they could have given her a PCR test and said that it was COVID back then if there had been a word for it. So that as I think I mentioned before, this was this PCR test with Carrie Mullins, who invented it, and how he's spoken out against how useless that test is, and Fauci as well. He's spoken out a lot against Fauci because he's worked with Fauci, and so that he really, really doesn't know much. And it's suspicious that Carrie Mullins died about a year ago, before all this kind of pandemic came in. But he was amazing. He was a Nobel Prize winner. He was a very, very bright guy, and he could see through all of this nonsense. And so now we're relying on these tests and creating this test-demic. So, I honestly don't think anything different is happening, really. Well, actually, there's fewer deaths, overall than there were back in 2017, 2018 with that Australian flu, as they called it, which took my mum. And, this will happen. This will happen. So many old folks die. They get to that kind of age, and pneumonia is kind of the thing that sees them out. But we have seen, we've got friends on the front line, and we have seen early on in this, we saw so many handover sheets, medical records, just faked, really. I mean, at the end of an enormous amount of comorbidities, an enormous amount of polypharmacy, any one of which could have killed these people. In the next month or two, there's COVID tacked on the end. And often it's just suspected. I mean, we have a friend who, I don't know if I should reveal this, but we have a friend who will remain nameless, who has been, just as they did in the 1918 flu pandemic, attempted to infect himself by putting swabs from COVID patients up his own nose. And just as they proved in the 1918 flu pandemic, it isn't actually even communicable. There's something else going on. So, I mean, that sounds like a terrible conspiracy theory. Oh, my God, of course it happens. Of course it works this way. Of course it's spread by, coughing and sneezing and using too many T's and P's when you're singing in a band in a pub. All this nonsense that's coming out now. So it can be seen like that as if you just look at it at the surface. But if you dig a little bit, it's obvious nonsense, and people really need to start to dig, because the tragedies that are actually going on, the suicides, the collapsing of businesses, and the old folks just being neglected. I mean, there was one point early on in this where my missus was being called up practically every 5 minutes. Her phone was going, will you come and work in this old folks' home? Will you come and work in that one? Because basically the carers were running away because they were so frightened. And so these old folks, some of them totally dependent on being fed or given these medications to keep them alive. I'm not condoning these medications. I think they're appalling, but extending life in a very unnatural fashion. But, basically that's why they died, not because of any virus whizzing through the care home. Most of them had no respiratory symptoms whatsoever. And she was seeing this very early on. And this is what we're hearing. Of course, you start to say that, and it's all blasphemy. But the docs that we know who are saying different on the front line, my partner who's saying different things on the front line, there are other people around her who are terrified. They're still terrified. doctors and nurses are not immune to this enormous amount of fear-mongering that's going on. Although one source of ours, he says that he works very much on the front line and in many COVID wards, and he says that, he'd say that 90% back in March or whatever believed in this, and now probably about 80% of those have woken up. And this is nonsense. But a lot of them are very frightened to speak out because, they're worried about their jobs. They suddenly don't get any money. The whole thing is just hanging this money over us and hanging this carrot. I mean, I've taken some helicopter money. My business has gone down. I mean, in some ways it's come up with the consults that I do online for autoimmune. Sometimes even just for fear now. People are terrified. And so I talk to them, that side of the business has come up, but other sides have gone down, like our carnival conferences and whatever that we've had to cancel and lost thousands on it. And my whole music career really, has collapsed as well. I mean, I'm okay. I have a great life here. I have a lovely family and I'm pretty chilled, but how it's hit so many people and the suicide rates going up and all these dreadful things. So why people can't see at the moment that whatever's happening, the death rate, even the fake death rates, where they've tagged COVID onto somebody that's been hit by a bus, or had a motorcycle accident, I heard, or all sorts of things. Even if you use those figures, the cost of the lockdowns is so much higher. So we need to get rid of this fear. I mean, I saw a beautiful meme a little while ago where there's some great big sort of board and there's a cliff edge and there's this crowd standing on the board, and over the edge of the cliff is this guy on a pulpit sort of preaching at them, and they're all going, yeah, and they're all subservient. They just need to step off the board and this guy falls off the cliff. And that's the situation we're at the moment, I mean, I understand there are some people completely freaked, completely taken in by this, but I reckon now as I walk around supermarkets with no muzzle on, and there are maybe 3 or 4 other people in the supermarket without muzzles on, and we just sort of laugh as we see each other, and sometimes I'll go up and high five them or even give them a hug. I love it. I love that rebellious nature of it. And I just know that there's other people in that supermarket, maybe 30% have now seen through it. If they take it off, if they just get rid of the fear, get rid of the compliance, and just say, listen, fuck you, to the people who are doing the control of this, and say, I've had enough, and I'm not complying whatsoever to any of this, and it will be over pretty soon. It might be over anyway. I think there's probably a tipping point coming. I'm very optimistic, but I still do get a bit shouty when I drive around in the car and particularly see people in the middle of the street with them on, and I don't find it so funny anymore. I just want to go up to them and kind of take them off and say, listen guys, come on, stop it, don't be so silly. You can't really do that, you can't impose on them, but that's the way it is. I mean, I've not had fear. I've been affected by it hugely, but fear, no.
That concludes part 1 of our interview. Part 2 will be available soon in the subscribers area at legalizefreedom.com.
legalizefreedom.com